Good afternoon, everybody. We're just filtering in from the waiting room. We usually give everybody a few minutes, so a couple more minutes and we'll start. We're going to give it another minute and then we'll begin our program. All right, well, I think we are slowing down for the waiting room. So that means everybody is pretty much here so we can begin. Just wanted to say good morning or afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from. I'm Jamie Pasquinelli, District Manager of ULI Pittsburgh. As always, we just wanted to thank our sponsors that make our programming possible. Today is the second program of our sustainability series in partnership with the City of Pittsburgh. Additionally, this event is supported by ULI's Greenprint Center for Building Performance and Urban Resilience program. ULI Greenprint is a worldwide alliance of leading real estate owners and financial institutions committed to improving the environmental performance of buildings and reducing carbon emissions by 50% by 2030. The Urban Resilience Program works with members and communities around the country to prepare for environmental vulnerabilities and the impacts of climate change, such as flooding or extreme heat. Learn more at uli.org/sustainability. Our third and last program in this series will take place in November. The program overview is as follows. Improving building performance through policy requires communication between policymakers in the real estate and building sector to be successful. This virtual workshop will convene city staff and ULI Pittsburgh members for an open collaborative discussion on future directions in sustainability policy, providing an opportunity for members to weigh in and inform the city on how new regulations, mandates, and incentives can be designed to help drive innovation, minimize disruption, and maximize value add for the real estate sector. Today, we have an all-star cast of speakers that include Stephen Baumgartner, Urban Systems Strategist, Baumgartner Urban Systems Strategy, Rebecca Kiernan, Principal Resilience Planner at the City of Pittsburgh, Will Bernstein, Climate Advisor, American Cities Climate Challenge, and Derek L. Tillman, the President and CEO of Bridging the Gap Development, LLC. This program is being recorded and will be posted on our YouTube channel in about a week or so. Please see the link in the chat that I will put after the program to subscribe, and also follow us on social media for more information on upcoming programming. Also, please make sure you have your mics muted throughout the program to prevent any distractions. We will be engaging in a Q&A after the presentation. We ask that you insert your question as soon as you feel that you have a question, and then we'll ask you to ask your question during the Q&A. Additionally, our presenters will be staying after the program to engage in a hallway chat. Please remain in the Zoom meeting if you would like to join us. I will now hand it over to Stephen. So Stephen, take it away.
Thank you, Jamie, and welcome everybody. Yeah, as Jamie mentioned, please throw comments and questions in the chat. I'll do my best to keep my eye on that, as well as sort of navigate our dense discussion here today. We have a lot to cover. Really, I think all of us are feeling a lot of uncertainty about our urban cities, systems, our communities, and what it means in a time of colliding crises, really. Economic uncertainty, racial tensions, obviously a pandemic, which is uncertain for all of us, touching us in different ways, and luring and immediate threats of climate change that are hitting Pittsburgh in all sorts of various ways. So today is really about having a discussion about what our city is doing, tremendous efforts that are driving policy and information at a city level, all the way down to asset level, and how our developers, our private actors, even individuals should be thinking about their role in advancing our city to address these and other challenges. So we're going to kick it off with Rebecca from our city, who's going to take us through the breadth of the work that they're doing, and we're going to move through scales pretty much, and again talk through a bunch of issues related to climate resilience. Please keep the chat moving, and excited to be here with all of you. Rebecca.
Thanks, Stephen. Can everybody see my screen? Is it up? Great. Hi, I'm Rebecca Kiernan. I'm a principal resilience planner with the City of Pittsburgh. Thanks for tuning in today. It's great to be here. So I am, in limited time, going to try to get through 3 things today. I'm going to talk a little bit about what the Sustainability and Resilience Division at the city does and our 1PGH portfolio of work. I'm going to talk a little bit about the climate impacts that the Pittsburgh region is already experiencing from some research that a resilience fellow, Melanie, in our office has compiled. And then talk a little bit about the need for climate adaptation and planning infrastructure and our investments, mostly at the city scale, but could also apply in the private sector. So our office deals with both climate mitigation and then adaptation too. So sustainability is the mitigation side. That's your traditional climate action plan, which my colleagues talked about on a prior webinar. What I focus on in my work is resilience, and that really stems from an engagement that we had that started in 2015 with the Rockefeller Foundation through their 100 Resilient Cities program. So it's grounded in this definition of urban resilience is the capacity of individuals, communities, institutions, businesses, and systems within a city to survive, adapt, and grow, no matter what kinds of chronic stresses and acute shocks they experience. Chronic stresses are those slow burning daily issues that the city deals with on a regular basis. So things like, inequality and environmental degradation. And then acute shocks are those one-time events. So like the pandemics or the economic failures that we're kind of seeing right now. And we think about all of this in terms of the 3 global megatrends of urbanization, globalization, and climate change. So the work that we've done was basically grounded in 2015 by the city's P4 initiative. So the City of Pittsburgh, in partnership with the Heinz Endowments, developed P4, which stands for People, Planet, Place, and Performance. It's just a value system that we use in everything that we do from then on. So everything is organized into those 4 Ps. From there, we developed with the support of the Rockefeller Foundation through this 100 Resilient Cities program, and then with capacity from the RAND Corporation, we developed a preliminary resilience assessment, which is that scan of the city's shocks and stresses profile, which I'll get into in a minute. And so from there, we identified all of the challenges that we face. In 2017, we developed the 1PGH resilience strategy, which looks at those shocks and stresses and then starts to plan for them, coming up with objectives and goals and strategies that we could use to address them. one of our major challenges, one of our main stresses is economic and racial inequity. And so in 2018 and 2019, we worked with the City University of New York, along with 5 partner cities, and the RAND Corporation to develop the Pittsburgh Equity Indicators Report. This is a study that looks at 2 different groups. Some are done, high and low income, some was Black versus white population, but we looked across 80 different indicators and tried to measure where the largest disparities were between 2 disparate groups. So this way we were able to, identify, where those disparities are and start to target resources towards them. In 2018, we developed a 1 PGH investment prospectus, which took all of that prior work and started to cost out projects so that we had, strategies and ways to address our shocks and stresses ready to go down to the project level, including, costing it out. And then in 2019, we've recently adopted, we were the 2nd city in the US to formally adopt the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. We're starting to use this as a framework, a measurement framework for city operations. There's also conversations going on regionally about how we can all work together towards the goals. But we'll be releasing our first voluntary local review later this month, which is pretty exciting. So Pittsburgh Shocks and Stresses profile was developed as part of that first study, the preliminary resilience assessment, with help from the RAND Corporation. What you're looking at is our profile. The bubble sizes correlate to how large the problem is. We found ourselves to be more of a stressful city, knowing that we have all of these underlying challenges, and if not addressed, they would likely turn into shocks or be exacerbated by any shocks that we saw. So number 1 was economic and racial inequity. Also aging infrastructure, environmental degradation. That environmental degradation stems from our industrial past. So that's poor soil, water, and air quality. And then this idea of fragmentation. So that's, Allegheny County has 130 municipalities, all different service structures. We have 3,200 nonprofits that operate just within city limits. We have 90 different neighborhoods. A lot of them are, divided physically. So we have physical barriers with our hillsides and our bridges. And then, in today's context, we're seeing, a whole new meaning to fragmentation where people are, home and separated. And then on the shock side, climate change and extreme weather events. So Pittsburgh was anticipated, and this is from 2016. So Pittsburgh was anticipating, a warming and wetting due to climate change, which we are seeing, which is what I'm going to explain a little bit further in the coming slides. Infrastructure failure. Now you can start to see how aging infrastructure could, if left unaddressed, turns into infrastructure failure. So this is how the shocks and the stresses interrelate. Hazmat incident, economic collapse, landslide and subsidence, and disease outbreak and pest infestation. So for 2016, we had a pretty good record for prediction. In the following slides, I'm going to blow through them really quickly because I'm low on time, but just wanted to discuss a little bit about the climate changes that we are already seeing. So, we were anticipating climate change for a long time, and now we are starting to see those trends take place. Pittsburgh is experiencing an overall temperature increase, but we're also seeing higher highs and lower lows and more extreme temperature swings. And this freeze-thaw cycle tends to wreak havoc on some of our natural and physical infrastructure. Inversion events are increasing. If you're not from Pittsburgh, an inversion event is when a warm air front comes in and traps the cold air down below. Due to our topography, we're kind of energy from local air traffic and other industry. We tend to have what's a pollution event. So pollution will get trapped there. And over time, you can kind of see in this table, we are starting to see more of these events. They're happening more frequently. We tend to be in inversion around 200 days a year. And then you can see how stresses and shocks interrelate to cause a larger impact. So one of our major stresses is aging infrastructure. And in the stormwater space, this is our combined sewer system. In the map that you're looking at, we also have this phenomenon where we have piped a lot of our natural waterways. So the gray blob in the middle is Pittsburgh. The hydrology map outside of it is Allegheny County. And we basically took all of that hydrology, stuck it into a bunch of pipes. Climate change has increased rainfall frequency, intensity, and duration. And now what we're seeing is, hazardous flooding and combined sewer overflow. 2018 was the wettest year on record, followed by 2019, which was the third wettest year on record. These are not outliers. These are new normals. So you can, kind of see how the weather patterns have been changing here in terms of precipitation. And our flooding events are occurring citywide. This is a 311 flooding incidence map that looked at, a couple of different complaint calls, but basically what you're looking at is that stormwater challenges are happening throughout the city, not just in our low-lying areas, although there's more significant challenges there. Another resilience challenge that we have is stress of environmental degradation. So we have steep, unmanaged hillsides. The city has a network of greenways. This is about 1,200 acres that we do not maintain or manage. They are experiencing, as you can see in this picture, some, overgrown vines that are swallowing trees. It's a shallow root structure for those vines. When they take down those trees whose roots are stabilizing the hillsides, you end up having, when the temperature swings, when the freeze thaw comes in and it breaks up that soil and then it's pummeled by rainfall, you then end up with a bunch of landslides, which is what happened to us in 2018. You'll also notice that 2018 was that record rainfall as well. So landslides are occurring more frequently. They're outside of our landslide prone areas. They're also emanating from unmanaged public property. In 2018, we spent roughly $12 million just in landslide cleanups alone. In 2019, we spent about $6.8 million in remediation. These are a lot of challenges that we really need to get ahead of so that we can start using those dollars that we're spending on landslide cleanups is just impeding any other progress that needs to happen in the city. Another issue area, as our temperatures are increasing and we're seeing hotter summers. Our summer surface temperatures are hot. That's that middle map that you can see, but it also correlates to where we have tree canopy coverage, which also correlates to, income levels. So there's, a lot that we can do by targeting resources in the right places when we analyze how the weather patterns are changing. And then our members really are against the changing climate. That health of the ecosystem is really important when we're going to be hit with, higher temperatures, poor air quality, more rain. We want to make sure that the ecosystem is providing the services that it was meant to provide. And so, I really like this map because it kind of shows it's that theory of the Amazon is the lungs of the earth. It's kind of like, if you could start to see it in terms of Pittsburgh's map like this too. So this is our street trees, our forest tree canopy, our greenways network, our parks. But what we should really be thinking about too, in addition to improving the health of our natural ecosystems, we should be making investments in the built environment. And we should be thinking about how to contribute that to this system. And we can do that through things like, thoughtful and sustainable design, thinking about what materials we use, and making sure that our architecture and engineering is resilient. And so just in summation, we're already experiencing the impacts of climate change, and we can get into this deeper in the conversation. We could use a deeper understanding about how these changes are already impacting our operations, facilities, and properties. And we have, the intention to start engaging our departments to dig a little bit deeper into that. And then there are opportunities for adaptive management that we should be exploring to make sure that our assets are a first line of defense against the changing climate. For example, our greenways system is unmanaged. We could manage it and try to think about how to do natural plantings to get ahead of landslides. Inversion events, maybe there's some sort of demand response system that we could come up with. We could maybe, run our refuse trucks later. We could issue work from home assignments, since it seems to be working out right now. For heat islands, we could do cool roofs. There's tree canopy strategies. And there's a ton of other strategies that we could use for adaptive management. And then Will is going to talk a little bit about how we're thinking about our investments. But adjusting our operations and planning ahead, this is going to save really scarce resources. And it's going to, if you can get that funding before you have an incident, then, we don't have to spend that extra money, because it's always more costly on emergency management, cleanup, repairs, lawsuits, etc. So I'm going to kick it over to my colleague, Will, and end there.
All right, thank you, Rebecca. Hello, everyone. My name is Will Bernstein. I'm the climate advisor for the City of Pittsburgh. I'm placed with our Sustainability and Resilience Office through the American Cities Climate Challenge. It's an initiative of 25 cities across the U.S. that are working to meet aggressive climate goals by 2030. And as a part of that work, we're looking closely at the ways that we actually budget for both climate mitigation and adaptation. So I want to follow up a little with that on the things that Rebecca talked about. So, Rebecca talked about a lot of the things that we know we need to and should be doing to address the climate impacts that we're facing. But as she hinted, there are serious budget implications to doing this. And in an era when our city revenues are being drastically lowered by COVID, we have to be very careful and smart about the way we address these impacts on our budget. So this map just shows where some of those events are happening and the kinds of financial impacts that we're seeing. The quick story is it's millions of dollars a year in flooding and landslide remediation. And as Rebecca said, these events happen on public land, but it's not always the land that we manage carefully. So one of those financial lessons is, we recently did increase revenues for parks through an increase in the real estate tax. But the question is, are we going to put those into the parts of parks that people always see, or also can we leverage that new funding to help stabilize hillsides and help turn parkland into water retention to help reduce flooding as we move forward with those kinds of projects? And that's really, I think, a lot of what Rebecca was getting at, is that if we address these issues now and make our publicly owned property, use it as a tool for preventing the negative impacts of climate change, then they turn from a liability that's costing us money every year to an asset that's actually saving us money by limiting the damage of climate change. It's important for us to start setting these ecological standards and to use all of these ecosystem services to function as ways to stabilize our slopes, improve air quality. There's a climate mitigation component to this as well. That's a nice alignment, which is that as we plant more trees to stabilize hillsides, we're also increasing the carbon sequestration potential of our city's land. But again, ultimately, doing this adaptation of our assets to protect people and places is a budget exercise. So we need to start doing things like actually analyzing how much money we're spending every year in routine maintenance and cleanups of these kinds of disasters. Can we shift those into land management that's going to save us money rather than cost us more every year? We need to understand more and more how much these post-disaster costs are, And we need to start allocating resources to optimize all of this natural infrastructure. So everything from stabilizing hillsides, green infrastructure projects to absorb stormwater, and really building out our tree canopy, which is one of the key climate goals of the city's climate action plan. Having said that, if you look at the way we currently do our budgeting, we need to start thinking about how we make some changes to really target these climate mitigation and adaptation strategies. And probably the first thing to note is that when you look at the capital budget process, this would have happened in 2019 for the 2020 budget, the public responses to the city's stated budget priorities highlighted critical infrastructure as a top priority, with 80% of respondents saying that it was highly important. But things like green infrastructure and climate were identified as important by really only around half or even less than half of residents. So one thing we have to do is start telling that story better, of explaining that our budget decisions are very closely tied, and our decisions on green infrastructure and climate are tied to our critical infrastructure and are important to list as budget priorities. And the second thing is we need to start understanding those priorities and those budget allocations better ourselves. Currently, the way the capital budget, for example, is categorized is really around functional areas. But when you look at that spending, we're still not in a position where we can say, how much are we really spending on climate mitigation strategies or on green infrastructure strategies. There are much broader categories. So that's an area where we're going to need to start thinking more carefully about how the budget works. And so there are really kind of three big tools that we're looking into now, both through the climate challenge and other work, to help us mitigate and adapt to climate change. One is just priority-based budgeting, which organizes municipal budgets by goals and outcomes rather than just by departmental line items. And what it does, it really lets you target budget reallocations and savings and revenue opportunities by your priority areas, instead of just going along with, this is how much each department got last year, and we're going to adjust that a little bit each coming year. And this is something we're getting direct support from the Climate Challenge for, and hopefully we'll have something to talk to you about for that next year. The Green Initiatives Trust Fund is a vehicle where we ought to be able to reinvest the operational and energy savings from climate mitigation and adaptation projects. So when we do a green infrastructure project that reduces our flooding mitigation costs in future years, we want to recognize those savings and then put them back into doing future projects. And then finally, empowering our procurement process so that we align our purchasing power with our values and priorities, where we really set standards for the way the city consumes goods and energy and invests its money. One good example of this that we've recently achieved is the city's public pensions have divested from fossil fuels. So it's one example of the way we can use a huge part of city spending to actually directly advance our climate goals. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Stephen.
Yeah, I think in the interest of time, we're going to move right into Derek Tillman of Bridging the Gap Development. It's been great talking with Derek over the last days and weeks. His company's Bridging the Gap, but as you'll see, there's a lot of gaps he's filling with his messages and stories and intentionality around some of the issues we're talking about. So thank you, Derek. Pass to you.
Great.
And thank you, Rebecca and Will, for that. I'm sure I will have some questions on that information.
Thank you, Stephen.
We got you, Derek. We can see it.
Okay, great. So just want to talk a few moments about climate adaptation for So again, as I was saying, climate adaptation for extreme weather. I believe that developers can play a key role in advancing sustainability and resilience in our city, and Bridging the Gap is focused on doing its part to do just that. So when making decisions for a project, we look for alignment. Alignment with goals that are actionable, but also that address our climate crisis. Goals that are actionable, that address social equity and everything that's kind of going on, in our region and as it relates to equitable development, et cetera, things of that nature. We look for the proper return on investment. So the numbers still have to work. It has to make sense from a business perspective, of course. We look for proof or evidence in performance in operations. One thing we don't want to do is just do sustainable development measures and then it doesn't actually give us the impact on the back end that we're looking for from a savings and operational efficiency perspective. I also look to connect my values with my actions. So everything that we're doing, we really believe in, and we're being intentional about the decisions that we're making. And I also look to surround myself with experts who share my value and vision. So when we're putting these teams together, making sure that the teams actually share our values, that they're focused on doing this, and that they understand why this is important as we move forward in this world that we are in. So I make a real example where we incorporated that. This was a recent project we completed known as the Miller Street Apartments. This was a 36-unit affordable housing project, had very low energy, was an all-electric building. It's not Passive House certified, but we incorporated a lot of Passive House components. So our building envelope, our MEP, mechanical, electrical, plumbing systems, our windows are all sustainable. We also are Enterprise Green Community certified. And then from a resiliency perspective, we incorporated a robust, innovative, supportive services program where we focused on starting with trauma-informed development, trauma-informed community development, where we partnered with the organization that looked at the trauma that folks may have faced in their lives as it relates to affordable housing and just kind of growing up in certain conditions, and what we could do to help them overcome those traumas that will help them go on to, gain or sustain long-term employment, go back to school, et cetera. With this supportive services program, we also have a motivational speaker series. We have a financial literacy component, and we also have a leadership development component to really help our residents become leaders in their everyday lives, their families, their work environment, et cetera. Building on that success with our current project, Fifth and Dinwiddie, we really wanted to take things to the next level as it relates to sustainability. So this project, this is the east site of the Fifth and Dinwiddie project, which includes an adaptive reuse of an existing structure that currently sits at 20,000 square feet. We'll add a 20,000 square foot addition. It will be co-working space. It will be commercial office space. We'll have a small retail footprint. And then we'll also have a training program that focuses on actually clean energy jobs. So helping folks in the community enter into this sector. From a resiliency and climate adaptation perspective, we will be Passive House certified, full certification. We're incorporating Reset Air certification, which is the highest level of air quality for any building. That's the highest standard, the gold standard. And we'll also be Fitwel certified. These sustainable development measures are even that much more important in the post-COVID world, and really are being intentional about dealing with some of the climate change effects that are going on, definitely in our region, but really across our world. So what is sustainable development? Well, it really kind of depends on who you ask. From academia, they really focus on this hybrid, this mix between economic development, social progress, and environmental responsibility. That where those three collide is where the definition most lies from an academia perspective. So it produces a more fair world, a viable and livable world. From a socio and political perspective, really that the UN SDGs, the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and within this project that I just talked about, the Fifth Indemnity Project, we're really pulled out certain components of the UN SDGs where the project weaves through all these different SDGs and being intentional about meeting them. And if you ask our development team, it's actionable. So things that really where we take these ideas and being responsible, socially responsible in these ways, and really putting it into action in our development projects, so that it ultimately reduces fuel poverty. It increases and raises the standard for indoor air quality, and it really sets the stage and a bar for development, going forward. Right now, we are really focused on outcomes. Outcomes as it pertains to our sustainable development goals. And when we looked at all the different certifications, we really landed on Passive House and Reset In. And the main reason was because they drive the most impact for the least amount of cost. So, from an energy savings perspective, from a environmental perspective, it's really the best of both worlds, where you get the impact, but you also get the cost savings, and it's not at a premium as some of the other certifications. So just a few more slides. So Passive House, it really now is either cost neutral or the same cost or even less than conventional construction. So in 2015, you see that it was about $160 a square foot for just construction for conventional construction, and it was $170 for Passive House. In 2016, it was $170, about $171 for conventional, and $173 for Passive House. Now in 2018, that scale has tipped, where actually Passive House is either cost neutral or even less in some cases. But the difference really depends on the team that you put together. You have to have the right team that understands these metrics, that is experienced in this realm, and can really help to make this happen. So in closing, why are these solutions resilient? Well, first of all, it reduces the energy burden for residents. I knew that we were doing the right thing when I talked to one of our residents at the Military Apartments, and I asked them, what's your average utility bill looking like? And mine for electric. But their electric bill includes their heating as well as their general electric. And it said $50. And I said, wow, that's amazing. So really just that conversation showed me that we were doing the right thing. And now we're looking to kind of raise that standard and raise the bar to an even higher level. It also creates healthier and safer places. Passive House is much more comfortable. You don't have one part of the house that's very hot and other part that's very cold, but it's really neutral and just a much safer and cleaner environment. We're addressing environmental justice. In a lot of African-American communities, you have a lot of environmental issues with companies dumping hazards or air quality is not as good. Well, one of the things that developers can do to play a role is incorporating sustainable development into their development projects, which helps to address environmental justice issues. It improves quality of life, which connects to one's social life. When you have extra disposable income, you can do things like go out, enjoy your family, go to social events, things that a lot of folks may take for granted. But solutions and thinking of these things holistically like this actually impacts residents' quality of life and social life as a whole. So That's really what we're focused on at Bridging the Gap, really making the impossible possible, while also being socially responsible. So with that, I'll end there and hand things back over to Stephen.
So my name again is Stephen Baumgartner. I have a consultancy called Baumgartner Urban System Strategy, and really what I spend my time doing professionally here from Pittsburgh is helping bridge between a lot of our city scale initiatives and priorities to help developers, institutions, and other entities think about these critical issues associated with climate risk. A lot of the core values that are fundamental to my work are around building systems with the people they serve, really working with neighborhoods, thinking about how to break down some of these heavier systems to the scale so that we can understand them and really work with them, these energy and water and transportation systems, as well as ensuring every investment is tied back to a client's value set. It's really important. And using evidence, the data, experience, things we've learned as we've tried and failed, and of course empathy, working with the people these systems serve. And this is a series of very complex situations, right? Our city has all these different connections. Rebecca framed a few of them. We have people that are working and playing and living within these systems, and the interrelationship with them are very complicated. But there's a lot of conversation about Pittsburgh as a scale in which to address these. And I think the neighborhood unit that has sort of been evolved with our city based on all sorts of topography and other physical and growth patterns creates a series of networks where the neighborhood is really becoming a new powerful scale for localism. And there's a lot of conversations about the sort of 15-minute city, right? Talking about connections within a 15-minute walk or bike to amenities and health services and food and work and play. And I think what we're seeing right now is a sort of confluence of the power of the neighborhood while stitching it together at a city scale, and the importance to think about all of these scales in advancing these resiliency issues. So I talk a lot about nested scales of influence in my work, and for a developer or a private entity, the typical thinking is that they have direct influence over the site, the building, the places, spaces that they're building. But all those decisions actually have a series of indirect influences on our city, on our neighborhoods, right? Not when you decide a solution for energy or water for your building or how you're connecting people through mobility, you are creating decisions that influence our city's networks. If you're creating access to open space, there are all these ripple effects that apply for those decisions. And I think it's the power of all of us, our cities, as well as individuals, to be thinking about the systems and networks that bridge our places and our neighborhoods, because we all need to be influencers of those. And especially developers that are only thinking about a site, it's really critical for all of us to have a new responsibility to be thinking about our role in investment into our neighborhoods and be able to really work and stitch those issues together across scale. And I'm excited because after this talk, we'll hear a lot about how Derek's thinking about this and the work that he's been doing. And we've been working with developers to actually be intentional about these things, right? Really start to do the work to ask yourselves, what are your values as a developer, as an architect, a planner, an urban actor? How do those values align with your neighborhood's values? And how can we learn about those shared values and create a vision with measurable objectives on what it is that you want to do to be thoughtful about advancing your neighborhood's resiliency? And there are a ton of tools. Rebecca mentioned some of them, 1PGH, the equity indicators, our neighborhood planning guides from the city. These are very thoughtful and rich documents that allow our urban actors to have the tools to be able to influence and understand the impacts of the decisions they're making. And this sort of ROI thinking of a developer, I think, is shifting. I mean, we're seeing a lot of developers ask the question, how do I prioritize investment beyond just this sort of site scale ROI and go into some of the things Will was talking about. If I can start to find the partnerships with the city that allow me to think about some of those implications outside of my boundary, right, of influence, those have amazing economic resiliency benefits that create stronger neighborhoods, create better fabrics for our communities, address issues of equity. So being intentional about those things is really, really important. And on the interest of time, I'll skip this, but I think when you are thinking about teaming arrangements, partnerships, the collaborations that we're forming to influence our built environment, I believe we all need to be more direct at really understanding the issues that were surrounding us. Use some of the information that Rebecca just mentioned. Understand past but future climate issues. Think about all of the implications of those bubble charts that she showed and the implications of all of the work that's been going in. Really get into the equity indicators and understand what they mean and how you can influence them with your actions, and start to really think about scale and challenge scale about how your physical investments bridge site, district, neighborhood scales, and how those indirect influences are not this sort of blind thing 5 years down the road. We are impacting our city every day with the decisions we make about the investments we put forward. And it's really, I think, those big ideas that come from those explorations about stitching together our systems, about thinking new ways about how stormwater works through our developments, access to food, access to health services, cleaner energy that's more reliable and addresses things like energy burden for our cities. These are issues that every one of us needs to address when we make decisions about our investment. And if I could leave you with one thing, I think we all need to be more direct and intentional about our role in advancing all of those big issues that all put together really matter for the resiliency of our city and our neighborhoods. I want to mention eco-districts quickly. Our city has adopted eco-districts as part of our neighborhood planning guide. There's a lot of information about eco-districts online, and we can point you to some of them. But what's really fantastic about this framework is it puts these issues of equity, resilience, and climate protection up front, and encourages sort of co-authorship and dialogue with the neighborhoods that you work in. This is not just a framework or a protocol to be released at a neighborhood scale. I think everybody should understand the implications of this, even if you're dealing with a park or a building scale project or a smaller scale investment. There's a lot to be learned from this protocol in advancing resiliency for our neighborhoods. Eric, thank you so much. I know that was just a fraction of the stories that you have and the sort of testimonials and the sort of data, quantitative and qualitative, that you were getting from your work. If someone wanted to access more of what your lessons learned and some of the some of the benefits of some of the stuff they've talked about, where can we find more about this? Or I don't want to offer everyone emailing you directly or calling you directly, but how do we learn more about some of the lessons you've learned on these projects? Really fascinating stuff.
Sure, absolutely. Folks can definitely, feel free to reach out to me through ULI, and we can have a, offline discussion about lessons learned. And also we would look to connect them with some of our team members. One actually is, I noticed, is a part of this call now, Beth Eckenrode of the Oros Group. They were a sustainability consultant. So we would, look to connect them with some resources and just really have a more, concrete example and conversation about some of our lessons learned.
Yeah, and it's amazing how the idea of a sort of passive house strategy at a building can have a ripple effect into the neighborhood and really shape people's lives. I mean, we're all indoors more than we wanted to be these days, with working from home and maybe not commuting, some of us by choice, others not. but those decisions for the folks that actually don't have the mobility and feel like they need to be home, those are huge implications to not only their energy costs, but their well-being. And you know, again, I know you have a bunch of stories about that, but it's really, really powerful stuff. I wanted to maybe open-ended question here, but folks in the audience, please drop me a line or anybody a question, both within the 6 minutes we have here, as well as a following kind of coffee talk or whatever Jamie calls it afterwards. But Rebecca, Will, Derek, maybe open-ended to you guys. If you guys had a sort of wish list about connecting maybe developers or private actors with your work and the city, you know, what would you be asking of maybe developers to kind of be more aware? Just an open-ended question, what wish lists, you know, coming out of 2020 and into 21, how do we work together better in this space? Tools, initiatives, awareness, any thoughts about bridging that gap between city and private actors?
I can start. Honestly, I would wish for more Derek's. I was super blown away by that presentation. It's really interesting when, you know, like from my point of view, I'm working on all these studies, you know, like our equity indicators report, to hear a developer talking about energy burden and fuel poverty after, you know, we maybe not mandates, but like carrots and sticks for developers or for anybody to help address the problem or granting. But it's really great to, you know, see the development community taking on those values and reading the documents and understanding the challenges and, you know, putting yourself in the shoes of the people who would live there. And thinking about, you know, their conditions and how you could make life better for the people who work, live, or play in Pittsburgh. So yeah, I mean, you know, sometimes it feels like, you know, we're writing a lot of strategies and there's just no teeth to them. But it's great to have platforms like this where you can, you know, have conversations with the development community and then to hear about the awesome work that, you know, Bridging the Gap and others are doing.
If I can just piggyback on that, Rebecca, yeah, developers don't like sticks.
Yeah, that's why we don't give them.
But if I can give a practical carrot, you know, so one thing that I think of is accelerated processing for permitting, as well as zoning. You know, that's something that's critical for all developers. And if you do something like, you know, if you incorporate sustainable development as well as maybe 10% affordable housing into your development project, then you kind of get on a fast lane for permitting and zoning. Doesn't cost any additional money to the city, but it's a huge incentive for developers. So that's one example that I think way we can work together.
So we have a couple minutes here, not a lot of questions from the audience. Maybe a little bit about eco-districts from Marta. I think that's helpful. What's different about developing an eco-district? Maybe I'll put that out to the panel. I can weigh in if so. Derek, you want to talk a little bit about Connections Uptown or anything like that, or what you've learned about being around eco-districts, or I can pass that also to Rebecca.
Sure. So yeah, this project, Fifth and Dinwiddie, is in the Eco Innovation District. You know, it wasn't really, you know, anything extra for us because it was a part of what we were already thinking. And I think that's what kind of set us apart to show that we were the right team. But what's different is intentionality around, you know, why sustainable development is important, intentionality around building in innovative workforce development components, intentionality around providing opportunities for MWBEs, intentionality around amazing quality, high level design, and really bringing all these components and training as well, and also market rate, because we still do need market rate, units as well. But intentionality about bringing all these things together, while helping to bring a catalytic, transformative project that can help the city move forward. So I think that's what's different, is having that on the front end and really bridging all these gaps and bringing these different things together in one specific project.
That's great, Derek. And maybe I'll pivot there to back to Jamie. I know we're at the top of the hour. I'm not sure if you have any sort of formal closings before the hour, or if it's more of a soft transition into our next half hour, but I'll send it back to you.
Yeah, so I just wanted to thank all of our amazing speakers today for taking the time out to talk to us. You guys did an amazing job. Again, the recording will be available on our YouTube channel, hopefully by next week. Yes, thank you to Augie and Marta from the Green Print Center. We really appreciate you helping us with this, and please stay and follow us on social media so you can see our upcoming events and more information about our third and last installment of this series. So with saying that, if anybody would like to stay and have our hallway chat with our speakers or just each other, please stay. I'm gonna stop recording and have a great day if you're leaving, and if you're staying, we'll be here. Thank you.